They called me the wisest man who ever lived. Kings came from faraway lands just to hear me speak. My name was etched in gold. My throne, wrapped in ivory. My kingdom, a marvel to the world. But wisdom could not save me from myself. I was born into promise. The son of David, the man after God's own heart. I inherited a throne forged in blood and bathed in prophecy. And with that throne came a question from the God of heaven. Ask what you will, and I will give it to you. I asked not for riches, not for revenge, not for long life, but for wisdom. And he gave it. Oh, how he gave it. I built cities. I judged nations. I wrote proverbs and songs. The Queen of Sheba stood in awe at the brilliance of my court. I had it all. And yet, there was a creeping silence inside me. A hollowness wisdom could not fill. A shadow that followed me through every golden hallway. You see, I had everything. But what is a man profited, if he gains the world, and loses his soul? So I began to write. Not as a king. Not as a conqueror. Not even as a teacher. But as a broken man. A preacher. And I wrote these words. Meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless. Ecclesiastes 1 verse 2. This is my confession. My final sermon. The echo of a soul that once walked with God. And wandered far from him. But before I reached the end, I had a beginning. A fire in my youth. And a kingdom bursting with divine favor. Let me take you back. To when it all began. I was just a boy when the crown was placed upon my head. Too young for the weight. Too small for the robe. But God. He didn't see my youth, he saw my heart. One night, in a dream, he came to me. Not with fire. Not with thunder. But with a question. Ask what I shall give you. And I asked, not for vengeance on my enemies. Not for gold or glory. But for a listening heart. For wisdom. To govern his people rightly. And the Lord was pleased. He gave me more than I asked. He gave me wisdom unlike any before or after me. And with that wisdom, came everything else. I judged fairly. I ruled justly. And the people loved me for it. That is Solomon, the son of David. So young, yet so discerning. There was a moment, one that would be told for generations. Two women came before me. Each claimed to be the mother of the same child. There were no witnesses. No proof. Only tears. They begged me for judgment. And I said, bring me a sword. Cut the child in two, give half to one, and half to the other. One woman agreed. But the other. She cried out, no. Let her have him. Just don't kill him. And in that cry, I found truth. I gave her the child. For only a true mother would choose love over justice. The people stood in awe. They said, surely the wisdom of God is in this man. But here's the part they never tell you. Wisdom is not light. It is weight. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow, the more knowledge, the more grief. I began to see things others could not. I saw the hidden corruption in powerful men. I heard the unspoken cries of the poor. I felt the ache behind every celebration. The futility behind every ambition. It was a gift, and a burden. Sometimes I wished I didn't see so clearly. That I didn't hear the silent questions behind smiling faces. Sometimes I longed for simplicity. For ignorance. But there was no going back. Wisdom opened doors, and it opened wounds. Still, I pressed on. I wrote. I judged. I led. And I told myself, this is enough. But deep inside, a whisper stirred. A quiet unrest. A hunger that no crown, no choir, no chorus of praise could silence. It was the beginning of something I couldn't name. Not yet. Not then. But the days ahead. They would reveal the truth. Because the more I built, the more I realized. I was building a kingdom outside, while something inside me was slowly crumbling. There was a time when my kingdom sparkled like morning dew. A time when gold flowed like water. And the sound of laughter filled the courts of Jerusalem. I built great works. Gardens that stretched like paradise. Palaces that pierced the sky. Pools that shimmered like crystal under the sun. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. Stone by stone, I raised cities. From the dust, I lifted Israel into her golden age. But nothing stood as proudly as the temple. The temple. A house not for kings, but for the King of Heaven. 7 years of sacred labor. Cedar from Lebanon. Gold from Ophir. Priests, singers, craftsmen. All working in harmony, all for the glory of God. When we finished, I stood before the altar, lifted my hands to heaven, and prayed. Will God truly dwell on earth with man? And fire fell. The glory of the Lord filled the place like a cloud. The people fell to their knees. The trumpets blasted. And in that moment, it felt like heaven had kissed the earth. But I didn't stop there. I expanded borders. Made alliances with kings and queens. The world looked to me for wisdom and wealth. And then she came. The Queen of Sheba. Regal. Brilliant. She had heard of me. And she came to test the stories. With riddles. With questions. With eyes that searched the soul. And I answered her. Every question. Not one was too deep. Not one too hard. When she saw the splendor of my palace, the order of my servants, the offerings at the temple, she had no breath left in her. She said, what I had heard was nothing. The reality surpasses it all. I had it all. Everything a man could dream. Riches, fame, honor, power. My name echoed across continents. My wisdom, unmatched. But a shadow had begun to stretch behind the light. A quiet discontent began to stir inside me. I would rise from golden sheets, and still feel the ache of something missing. I would walk the halls of cedar and marble, and feel more alone than ever. No one saw it. Not the servants. Not the kings who visited. Not even my wives. But God did. He saw the slow drift. The tiny cracks forming in the walls of my soul. You see, a man can build monuments so tall that he forgets to look up. And I, the king who built a house for God, was beginning to neglect the house of my own heart. Then I looked on all that my hands had done, and behold, all was vanity and a chasing after wind. The palaces gleamed. The treasures overflowed. But the silence in my soul was growing louder. And as the glory of my kingdom reached its peak, the foundation beneath it was beginning to shake. Because a heart that was once fully God's was now drifting towards something else. There is a kind of sorrow that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It grows in the shadows, while the light still shines. At first, it seemed harmless. Political marriages. Treaties sealed with veils and vows. Foreign princesses with foreign gods. They brought incense. They brought beauty. They brought peace to the borders. And I welcomed them. 1, then 10. And soon, hundreds. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired, I refused my heart no pleasure. I told myself it was wisdom. A strategic move. A king securing the future of his people. But in truth, I was feeding a hunger that wisdom could no longer satisfy. They came with charm. With silks and perfumes. With idols carved from stone and gold. And I let them stay. Not just in the palace. But in my heart. Altars began to rise on the hills. Not to the God of my father. But to Chemosh. To Molech. To Ashtoreth. God had warned me. Do not intermarry with them. They will surely turn your heart after their gods. But I was no longer listening. My soul, once devoted, was now divided. I still offered sacrifices at the temple. Still quoted the proverbs I had written. Still wore the robes of a holy king. But inside, I was slowly forgetting the sound of his voice. I looked around me. At the laughter of foreign gods echoing through the courtyards. At incense rising not to heaven, but to lifeless statues. And yet, I did nothing. Because the people loved me. Because the kingdom was thriving. Because I believed I could balance both. Yahweh and the idols. Righteousness and compromise. Truth, and the lie. But I was wrong. The peace I had built began to feel artificial. The pleasure I once found became an ache I couldn't numb. My nights grew restless. My heart, once full of clarity, was now tangled in contradiction. I looked at the altars on the hills and whispered, "What have I done?" But by then, the roots had sunk deep. The idols weren't just in the city. They were in my bloodstream. I have everything, but I am empty. And yet, even in my silence, even in my betrayal, God did not strike me down. He watched. He waited. He grieved. And the Lord was angry with Solomon, because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Twice. He came to me, twice. And still I chose the fleeting over the eternal. My name still commanded respect. The throne still stood firm. But my peace had vanished. My prayers felt empty. My psalms hollow. And in the chambers of my soul, a question haunted me. What does it profit a man to gain the world, and lose himself? I used to hear him. In the hush of the morning. In the stillness before the priests would sing. In the quiet voice that once thundered in my soul. But now, only silence. God had not changed. I had. I forgot the one who lifted me from nothing. The one who called me, beloved, before I had ever built a single wall of stone. I replaced him with gold. With beauty. With philosophies. With empty rituals. I kept going through the motions. The incense still burned. The sacrifices still bled. But my heart was somewhere else. Buried beneath my altars of compromise. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. I remembered those words. But only after forgetting the life behind them. God warned me. Sent prophets. Whispered through dreams. Tugged at the edges of my soul. But I didn't want to hear. The truth was inconvenient. It would have meant letting go. Of pride. Of power. Of pleasure. So, I hardened myself. Like Pharaoh before Moses. I refused to turn back. And what is a man? When he no longer fears God. He is not wise. He is not strong. He is hollow. I was still Solomon the Magnificent to the world. But inside, I was Solomon the Broken. I would walk the halls of my palace. Gold shining under torchlight. Silk whispering against marble floors. And I would feel nothing. Not joy. Not peace. Only a gnawing ache. Pleasure had run its course. It no longer satisfied. Wine soured in my mouth. Laughter rang false. Even wisdom felt like a burden. So I began to write. Not sermons. Not decrees. But something else. A confession. A funeral dirge for the man I used to be. A message to whoever would come after me. That message became Ecclesiastes. It wasn't a book of answers. It was the outcry of a soul who had tasted everything. And still came up empty. Vanity of vanities, I wrote. All is vanity. Not because life is meaningless. But because life without God is. What good is wisdom? If it leads to pride. What good is pleasure? If it ends in regret. What good is work? If the one who labors forgets his maker. I wasn't writing for the scholars. I was writing for the broken. For the wandering. For the young man staring into the stars. Asking, what's the point of it all? The point is him. I had forgotten God. But even then, he had not forgotten me. His silence was not rejection. It was mercy. It was a space for repentance. Even as I bowed before idols. Even as my heart drifted farther than ever before. He waited. Waited for me to break. To fall on my knees. To weep over wasted years. To finally whisper. God. I miss you. And when I did. He was still there. Not angry. Not cold. But grieved. Patient. Present. That's who God is. The one who stays. Even when we walk away. I had known him as the God of fire and glory. But in my old age. I met him again. As the God of mercy. The God who lets his children return. What begins with compromise always ends in collapse. I thought I could control it. Manage my divided heart. Hold on to God with one hand. While clinging to my idols with the other. But kingdoms are not built on contradictions. And what is corrupted at the root will rot the whole tree. The warnings came. Whispers in the courts. Tensions in the provinces. Enemies who once trembled. Now began to rise. And the Lord raised up an adversary against Solomon. Hadad of Edom. Rezin of Damascus. Jeroboam. The man who would tear my legacy in two. These were not just rebels. They were consequences. The kingdom I had built so proudly. With stone and cedar and gold. Began to tremble beneath my feet. And my son. Rehoboam. He was not ready. He had grown up in my shadow. Feasting on comfort. Schooled in politics. But not in righteousness. I had taught him to rule a palace. But not to fear the Lord. And Jeroboam. A man I once trusted. Was now being stirred by prophecy. Behold, I will tear the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon. Tear. That word stayed with me. Like the ripping of fabric. A nation unraveling. The voices of the prophets grew louder. Their warnings, sharper. You have forsaken the Lord. You have led Israel into sin. Your house will not stand. And I. The wise king. The temple builder. The man who once heard God in the night. Could only watch. Watch as my choices became the seeds of rebellion. Watch as the people's loyalty began to fade. Watch as the throne I had inherited from David prepared to splinter. This was not a sudden collapse. It was slow. Like the erosion of stone. One small crack at a time. One forgotten commandment. One idol raised. One prayer left unsaid. Until the weight was too much. And the foundation broke. There is a time to build, and a time to tear down. My time to build had passed. Now came the time of reckoning. The walls of the city still stood. The temple still caught the morning light. But the spirit of the kingdom, the heart of Israel, had fractured. And I knew that when I was gone, it would never be the same. 10 tribes would leave. The house of David would be wounded. The temple I had poured my soul into would one day be defiled. Not by enemies, but by apathy. I thought I was building eternity. But I had only built monuments to my pride. The glory was fading. And I could no longer pretend that everything was under control. God had not forgotten his covenant. But I had. And now, the kingdom I had once ruled with wisdom and justice was being handed over to the consequences of my forgetfulness. Not because God delights in punishment, but because he honors truth. And the truth was this: a divided heart leads to a divided kingdom. Now, only silence remains. The halls that once echoed with laughter, with the counsel of wise men, with the praises of nations, they are quiet. No more the sounds of chariots or builders. No more the footsteps of queens bearing gifts. Just wind and memory. I sit here, gray with age, brittle in bone, but burdened more by regret than by years. I think back to the dreams I once had, to the boy I was, kneeling before the altar, asking not for riches or vengeance, but for wisdom. And he gave it. Oh, how generously he gave it. And I used it. I wielded it like a sword, spoke it like poetry, built with it, ruled with it. But wisdom without obedience is like a lamp with no oil. It glows, for a moment, then dies in the dark. Vanity of vanities, I wrote. All is vanity. It wasn't just a phrase. It was my truth. All I had gathered. Gold, palaces, wives, knowledge, fame. All of it turned to dust in my hands. You chase pleasure, and it escapes you. You chase meaning, and it slips through your fingers. Why? Because the soul was not made to be filled by anything less than God himself. I thought I could find peace in building. I thought I could silence the ache with accomplishments. But every stone laid, every banquet, every scroll of wisdom, only made the silence louder. And so, I wrote. Not for kings. Not for scholars. Not for the proud. I wrote for the broken. For those who reach the mountaintop and still feel hollow. For those who gain the world but lose themselves. Ecclesiastes became my confession. A mirror I held up to my soul. I had spoken many proverbs in my life, words to guide others. But Ecclesiastes was for me. It was what I needed to say before I returned to the dust. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. And now, at the edge of my final breath, let me leave you with the only truth that remains standing. When all else has fallen, fear God, and keep his commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. Not because God is cruel, or distant, or demanding, but because without him, nothing makes sense. I tried it all. I tasted it all. I built, I ruled, I explored, I sinned, I repented. And this is the sum of it. Without God, all is meaningless. With him, everything finds its place. If these words reach you, whoever you are, wherever you stand, Let them awaken you. Let them warn you. Let them heal you. Let my failure become your wisdom. You've heard the story. Not of a perfect man, but of a broken one. A king who had everything, and yet still found himself empty. A man who chased every pleasure, gathered every treasure, mastered every thought, and still ended up kneeling before the God he had forgotten. If his voice trembles through the pages of Ecclesiastes, it's not because he lost his mind. It's because he finally found clarity. Let my failure become your wisdom. That's his final gift. Not his temple. Not his wealth. Not his palaces or proverbs. But his confession. His honesty. His warning. And maybe, his redemption. Because no matter how far you've wandered, no matter how much you've compromised, how deeply you've built your own kingdom apart from God, there is still time to return, to rebuild, to surrender, to fear God, and keep His commandments. Not out of fear of punishment, but out of reverence for the one who gives life its meaning. So if this story stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Share it. Someone you know is building their own kingdom of sand, and they need this warning before it's too late. Subscribe to this channel for more biblical truths, uncovered from the dust of time. And as you go, remember this final truth, spoken not from a throne, but from a weary soul on the edge of eternity. In the end, the only kingdom that matters is the one we build with God. All is vanity, except Him.